I know this question often comes up, and many times people are wondering whether or not they should learn WordPress and what's the difference between WordPress and coding. And that's why I wanted to make this video for any beginner who's just getting started and trying to figure this stuff out. So I'm going to break this up into different sections, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the WordPress side of things. I'm going to talk a little bit about the coding side of things, and then I'm going to move through each section like that. So in the first section, I'm going to say this is the getting started section. And in the getting started section, let's talk about WordPress. WordPress is not something that you need to be a coder for. You don't need to know programming in order to get started with WordPress. WordPress is very beginner friendly. It's a WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. It's got a very user-friendly interface and drag and drop functionality. You can literally deploy a WordPress website without writing a single line of code. It can become a little challenging when you try to do stuff beyond the basics, but for the most part, it's fairly straightforward to get up and running. Pretty much anyone can get started if you have some technical know-how. You can set up a web page in minutes using some of their pre-built themes, some which are paid or even free. You can install different plugins to handle a lot of the more complicated stuff for you. You can use plugins for authentication. You can use plugins for forms. You can use plugins for even consuming APIs. They literally have plugins for everything on WordPress. You can pretty much build almost anything you need. Again, take that with a grain of salt because you might want to do something that's more complicated. And if you don't have the coding skills or the technical know-how, it's going to be a lot harder. Now, from a coding side of things, when you're trying to get started, there's a lot more foundational knowledge that you're going to need. When it comes to web development, you're going to need to have a basic understanding of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and possibly even a backend language. WordPress uses PHP on the back end, and you could use PHP if that might be the programming language that you're looking into, but there's various programming languages out there if you want to get into full stack web development. If you're just getting started, you could learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and build yourself a static website, a basic 3-page website or 1-page website, and have some static elements on the page with not much functionality. That is possible for somebody who's just getting started. If you're trying to build out something that really needs a lot of functionality and a lot of things that it can do, you're probably not going to be able to do that with just learning how to code, not from the very start at least. You'll really need to get a lot of hands-on experience and understand the fundamentals of web development and building things for the web in order for you to even understand where to get started with just building a website. All right, that's the getting started section. Let's move on to the next section that I have here. All right, so learning and skill development. In WordPress, you're going to have limited exposure to code. You might use a little bit of HTML and CSS and maybe some JavaScript, but more often than not, when you're just getting started with WordPress, you're not really going to be using those skills. Many times, even in previous videos where I talked about why you shouldn't learn WordPress when you're learning how to code, is because if you're learning how to code to get a job as a front-end developer or a full-stack developer or a back-end developer, learning WordPress isn't going to teach you much on the coding side of things. So unless you really get deep into the weeds and start building custom things like custom themes or building your own plugins or getting in there and really trying to build some custom code, which doesn't really happen all that often when you're working in WordPress, especially when you're first starting out. You just won't develop those coding skills. You'll learn how to use WordPress and your skills within WordPress and understanding how WordPress works in the ecosystem and a lot of the things that work within WordPress, but you might not get a lot of hands-on coding experience and coding skill development with that. There's a good chance too that you'll be focused more on building and making content because WordPress is really used as a content management system. And a lot of people that work in WordPress end up being content managers and content authors. You might end up getting a job in WordPress that might have you just working and dragging and dropping images and text into the website. And if you do e-commerce stuff, the same kind of thing applies. You might just be uploading images and dealing with more content and website administration type stuff, not anything that has to do with code. Some of the things about WordPress that will be a plus is you'll probably learn a lot of concepts about how the web works. Like I said, you'll learn a lot about content management systems. You'll also learn about digital asset management. You'll also learn about hosting and domains and deployment, which are all skills that can transfer over into other areas of web development outside of WordPress. While we're on the topic about web hosting and domains and deployment, let me tell you about today's sponsor, Hostinger. Hostinger is one of the few hosting platforms that is officially recommended by WordPress.org. You can easily get your WordPress site up and running with one-click installs, and they offer a bunch of additional features to make sure that your website is secure and performing as best as possible. Some of the things they offer free of charge are a domain name, SSL certificates. They have a free CDN that can boost your site speed up to 40%, email hosting, and even free website migrations. Their H-panel is extremely intuitive and easy to use, and they offer AI tools that can help you with content creation and even troubleshooting some of the issues you might have on your site. So figuring out how to do some of the more technical stuff is going to be a lot easier for you. Many times you can catch a really good sale, and right now they're having a Black Friday deal that you don't want to miss out on. As part of their early Black Friday deal, you can get hosting for as low as $249 a month. They also offer a lot of VPS hosting plans as well. So if you're looking for a VPS, you should check out their KVM2, which is a 67% discount right now during their Black Friday deal at $599 per month when you sign up for 24 months. They have great customer support, and all of this is backed by a 30-day money-back guarantee. So make sure you check them out at hostinger.com/DorianDevelops. I'll make sure to include the link down in the description. All right, let's get back to the video. Now to the coding side of things when it comes to learning and skill development. With coding, you're going to learn from the ground up approach and fundamental understanding of how the web works. Outside of the content management world, you'll actually learn how to code. You'll learn how to build for the web. You'll understand how the web works and how websites work. You will learn some of that with WordPress, but you won't get the same kind of exposure as you will if you're learning how to code, because you'll have to learn and understand all of those things on a more granular level, where WordPress just kind of does all the magic for you. When you learn how to code, you learn how all that magic works behind the scenes. And from a coding side of things, you're going to learn more about problem solving. You're going to learn more about debugging. You're going to learn more to think like a programmer, because that's really what we do as programmers. And learning how to code is just one of the skills and one of the things that you need in your tool belt in order to be a programmer. And another thing about learning and skill development that comes with coding is that a lot of the stuff that you'll learn in the coding side of things is transferable to other areas of development, other areas of software, other areas of web development. A lot of the stuff that you'll learn lives outside of WordPress. If you focus on being like a front-end developer, then you can focus and specialize in front-end development. If you focus on back-end stuff, you can be a back-end developer. If you want to do it all, you can be a full-stack developer. You can also transfer some of those skills into different frameworks. You can also transfer some of those skills into different areas of software development. If you get a good concept and understanding of how programming and coding works, then you can transfer those skills to all types of different areas, like app development, game development, desktop app development. So many different things that you can use your coding skills for, versus WordPress that really only applies to WordPress and maybe some other content management systems. But when you learn how to code, you learn how to build this stuff. When you learn how to use a tool, you really just learn how to use that one tool. So let's talk a little bit about customizing and flexibility within learning how to code and learning just WordPress. In WordPress, it's a bit rigid. You can customize and you can change a lot of stuff, but oftentimes when I've worked in WordPress, I find that when I want to customize something or when I want to change something, I'm kind of trying to work within the constraints of WordPress, and I'm limited to what I'm able to do within the content management system and within that particular tool. And you're often working against different themes, you're often working against different plugins, and you're kind of stuck having to try to make those things work within WordPress. Most times, a lot of people who hire you to work within WordPress, if you are a WordPress developer, they're going to expect you to be able to do some of that customization. And if you don't have any coding skills, you're going to kind of be stuck not being able to customize a lot of stuff and not being able to be very flexible within that content management system, because it just doesn't allow you to do that. It allows you to do it to some extent, but the more coding skills you have, the more you're able to do that within WordPress. Segue into the coding side of things. When you learn how to code, that's all about being able to customize, and it grants you all types of flexibility.
Oh, you is flexible.
You learn how to code, you don't have to just work within WordPress. You can choose different frameworks and tech stacks when you're building for the web. You can also use different content management systems. So if you don't want to just build in WordPress and you want to use different content management systems that use different programming languages and require you to have more technical skills and more coding skills, then you can do that. WordPress is a bit rigid, and while there is community support and different resources that you can use to try to make it more customized and make it more flexible, oftentimes you have to pay for those things, where with coding, the skills allow you that flexibility and customization and gives you the freedom of choice to choose what you build and what tools you use, because you're not constrained to a certain technology as you would be if you only learn WordPress. Let's talk about a little bit of time and effort, right? Because as developers, regardless of what you build in, most of us are very considerate and worried about our time and the amount of effort that is going to go into building stuff. Now, I will say with WordPress, you can get up and running fairly quickly. I'll say that local development is a little bit more complicated when you're first getting started, because that does feel like you need a little bit of programming skills in order to do that. But if you're using a hosting platform like Hostinger that I mentioned earlier, many of those offer a one-click install and are super easy to get up and running with WordPress. And it takes very little effort and time to press one button and just have a website built for you in WordPress. Again, local development's a little different, but if you're just deploying to Hostinger, it can be very, very easy. And I talked a little bit about it earlier, but the learning curve is minimal and it doesn't take a lot to learn how to use WordPress. And I want to mention that in this bullet point because that does kind of cut into the time and effort. Since it's easier to learn, it takes you less time and energy to learn how to use it.
Easy peasy lemon squeezy.
Now, with any WordPress site and even any website that you build, really, there's going to be a bit of ongoing maintenance. And more so in the WordPress world because of the use of themes and plugins. Many times there's a lot of security vulnerabilities and a lot of big updates that happen to these third-party plugins and themes that you end up using on WordPress that need to be updated, because WordPress sites are often getting hacked, and it's a bit of effort to always stay on top of maintaining websites that you build in WordPress. And it's not a lot of effort, because really most of the time you just need to update a theme or a plugin, but it is something to consider because it will cut into some of the time and effort and energy that you put into building WordPress website. That's just something that's going to be a little time consuming for you. Now, on the flip side, the initial upfront investment with learning how to code is a lot greater, and there's going to be a lot more time and effort and energy that you put into learning how to code. Just learning the basics of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript can take a really long time. And that's not even learning how the web works. That's not even learning how to build and deploy websites. But I will say that the time spent on learning those skills ends up giving you more value and is more rewarding because of the fact that you can use those skills in so many other things versus the time and energy that you put into learning WordPress. Even though it's quicker, you can't really use those skills outside of WordPress as you can with learning coding skills. Another thing too with learning how to code is development time. I mentioned earlier, building a website from scratch and starting to build a website from the ground up takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. And yes, once you get your framework of choice and you're comfortable building in a certain stack, then you can build a lot faster, but you're still going to have to build up your skills in order for you to get to that point where you can just like spin up a quick Laravel app or a Next.js app and just have something working. It usually comes with experience and it doesn't just happen right away, but I think that there's much more value, and in the long run, it's better to learn the coding skills because of all the things I've already mentioned. And just one more thing about effort and time with both WordPress and coding, you're gonna have a bit of time and effort and energy put into continuously learning. I will say when it's outside of WordPress, there's probably gonna be more things that you'll need to learn and maybe more things that you'll need to keep up with, because WordPress doesn't change as often as other tech stacks do and as other modern web frameworks and technologies do. And also, if you decide to work in WordPress, there's a chance that you're going to build on top of those skills, and you'll eventually probably want to learn HTML, CSS, and you'll probably want to eventually learn coding because it'll make you more valuable and it'll help you understand the tool that you use better and be able to customize and do more in it. So eventually you're going to end up learning how to code anyways, but you don't necessarily need to if you just want to focus on WordPress to start off with. But I will say that if you're focusing more on coding, there's going to be a lot more learning up front and a lot more learning moving forward. And on WordPress, you'll still be learning a lot as well, especially if you want to become really good at WordPress. I got a few more bullet points and then I'll wrap up this video. I quickly want to talk about career opportunities. I will say that WordPress often feels like there's more of a ceiling. WordPress developers many times when they work in a corporate setting, don't make as much as, let's say, like a React developer or a full stack developer would in some other framework or technology. But you will also see a lot of memes where everybody tells you that WordPress developers make a ton of money freelancing. Because there's a lot of businesses and a lot of small businesses and larger companies that use WordPress, and many times they deal with freelancers, and freelancers can make a lot of money working in WordPress. That said, there is that ceiling when it comes to getting like a corporate job and a career working in WordPress. And many times you might end up being more of a WordPress developer. And I don't mean to make that sound like a derogatory term, but what ends up happening is that you end up working in WordPress and you kind of become a content management worker, and you focus on updating text, and you focus on updating images, and you focus on updating plugins and themes, and you don't really build with code. And again, this might not be a bad thing if this is what you want to do, but it's something to think about. But with freelancing, you might end up finding yourself working in WordPress, even if you're a programmer and you have years of experience working in different technologies and you're not just focused on WordPress. Many of the times when you go into freelance as a web developer, you still end up doing a lot of WordPress work. So just something to think about when you're thinking about like career opportunity and growth. I think that WordPress has more of a ceiling, and you might not make as much money, whereas a general web developer or full stack front end, back end web developer has a lot more opportunity career wise and can make a lot more money. But in the freelance world, there's a lot of WordPress work out there when it comes to freelancing. So just something to think about. So as we wrap this up, I want to talk a little bit about combining both approaches and things to consider as like somebody who's new into web development and trying to figure out what they want to do. There is a lot of crossover between the two. Like I said earlier, if you learn WordPress, eventually you're going to learn how to code, because you're going to want to do stuff that you can't just do within the WYSIWYG, that you can't just do within the GUI of WordPress, and you're going to eventually have to touch some code. The longer you work with WordPress, the more likely that you're going to actually get in there and you're going to actually start writing some code. Even if it's just updating some custom CSS, even if it's just some small things like adding script tags to the heads and things like that, like you'll eventually touch some code in WordPress. And with that said, you could use learning WordPress as a way to make you a little bit more comfortable with building a website if you're somebody who's wanting to learn how to code, and vice versa. If you're already learning how to code and you're like, I want to learn this tool because a lot of people use it and I see that it's good for freelancing and I see that there's potential that I can make money with this, and I already have a little bit of an understanding of HTML and CSS, then feel comfortable going in and learning WordPress. Spend a week or two just messing around with it and building a few things in it, because it will be a lot easier for you to pick up. Now, if you're someone who is just getting started with WordPress and you haven't touched any code, there are some little things that you might do in there, like I said, updating some CSS or things like that, that will give you a little taste of what coding is like, and you'll see where you can apply it within the WordPress world. But don't be scared of either of them. If you are somebody who's learning how to code and want to check out WordPress, go do that. And if you're somebody who's been building in WordPress for a little while, or curious about WordPress but scared about having to learn too much when it comes to coding, start off with WordPress, get a little bit comfortable, and then when you need it, start learning the things that you need in order to do the things that you want to do within the content management system that you're using, in this case, WordPress. And if you really want to go crazy, start learning about how to build plugins, start learning how to build custom themes, and start learning how the coding side of WordPress works. Because like I said, eventually if you want to get paid a lot to work in WordPress, you're going to have to learn how to do those things. And it's just a matter of time. And the longer you work in WordPress, the more and more code you'll eventually be writing. And on that flip side, if you're somebody who's learning how to code and you're thinking about entrepreneurship, the more and more you look into freelancing, the more and more you're probably going to see WordPress come up. So get in there. Don't be scared of either, no matter which way you're approaching this. For new learners, if you're coming into this because you want to just build websites quickly and you want to maybe get into freelance and you don't really want to go all in on a web developer career path, WordPress is a great way to get you started with web development with not a lot of effort, and could possibly even make you some money. Now, if you're someone who is interested in learning how to code and you're serious about potentially getting a job as a web developer, and you really want to get in there and understand how things work and get a good understanding for how to build for the web, then start touching some code right away, and then maybe one day check out WordPress. If you're someone that's on the fence, Try them both. As I mentioned in this video, you don't need to spend a bunch of time learning WordPress. It's something that you can pick up quickly and then, test it out, see how you like it, and then move forward and continue what you're learning in coding. And if you really like it and want to dive in deeper, go as far as you want to take it. At the end of the day, both are great paths, and it all depends on what you're trying to do with the tool or the tech that you're trying to learn. And with all that said, I hope this video was helpful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.